All right, so I just finished watching part one of the new series, a new documentary on the Idaho for One Night in Idaho. Aired on Prime Video on Amazon. I think it's a three-parter. I watched part one. I'm going to watch the other parts very soon, but I've got some things I got to do throughout the day. But I wanted to be able to get my thoughts out on part one early because I know a lot of you are wanting to know my opinions about the documentary. Some of you don't want to watch the documentary yourself, so you want to have somebody else kind of tell you what to expect and whether or not it was worth watching, because I know that a lot of you don't want to hear just another hit piece. So what do I want to say about this episode so far? And again, these are just initial first reactions. It's not a super deep dive. I did take notes all throughout it, but I wanted to give you my opinions about it and tell you how I feel. So first and foremost, nothing was a hit piece as far as like Brian Koberger is the guy. In fact, this entire episode doesn't mention Brian Koberger at all. So the entire first episode has no mention of Brian Koberger. It is all about the victims and how the house was discovered and the family's initial reaction. So there's a lot of really good stuff from a human interest point. If you are interested in that, seeing the families tell their version of how they heard about it and what order they heard things in, what some of the early things that were said to them were. No big surprises as far as that goes. Not like earlier for stories that came out that the Gonzalez had been told that everyone was shot inside the house, which was a shocker to hear that was supposedly one of the first things that were said. Nothing like that came out. These were all pretty much straightforward tellings. In fact, the episode made it clear that almost everyone only knew about Xana and Ethan. Really, Kaylee and Maddie were an afterthought because everybody had found out that there was, the 911 call came in when only two of the victims had been found. That was Xana and Ethan. I'm going to explain that a little bit more in detail. So Hunter found Xana and Ethan, told them to call 911. Nobody actually had checked upstairs for Kaylee and Maddie at that point. And so everything at that point was basically about two victims. It later on came out after the kids had been gathered outside and police were crawling all through the scene and the EMTs were showing up, that an alert went out to campus saying that there were 4 homicides, and that's how the kids first found out that other people had died. There was a long period of time, it's clear, that went by where the kids didn't even ask about Kaylee and Maddie. Everything was focused on Xana and Ethan, and nobody really kind of thought for a while to even ask the question, hey, wait a minute, what about Kaylee and Maddie? And then the kids found out about Kaylee and Maddie only when the vandal alert came out and changed it from saying there's been homicides, which was a generic term used at first, to there have been 4 homicides. And then they realized that Kaylee and Maddie must be still in the house. So those are some interesting details. Does it fundamentally change anything in the narrative of the story? No. But there are some interesting parts that did raise my attention and some things that I want to comment, especially because I know how the true crime community works. And I know that some of these are going to get spun out of proportion. Some of them may be legitimate questions. So I want to weigh in on my thoughts on what parts of that are legitimate questions and which parts I feel like don't get too carried away with that. I think that would be a mistake. And it's just my opinion. So you're tuning in allegedly to hear what my opinion is. There's going to be a million of people out there giving their opinions about these episodes. And I'm going to be reading the book, by the way. I think that was the foundation of this TV series. I think James Patterson's book comes out tomorrow, or is it today? Today or tomorrow, James Patterson books come out. I already paid for the book. We'll start reading that immediately. Again, it's kind of a little difficult with these documentaries because now we already know in essence how the story ends, because Koberger has pled guilty to the charges. And so really, what can these things offer other than be able to maybe answer whether or not they got it right or whether they didn't answer the questions? Now, so let's get into some of the more details. So it did come out in the documentary that it was 11:45 when Dylan called. I believe it was Emily or Hunter. That part was a little confusing, whether she called Emily's boyfriend Hunter and talked to him first, or whether she talked to Emily. And this Hunter, of course, is a friend, not brother of Ethan Chapin. It's a friend that's nearby. And so Dylan called, instead of calling 911, Dylan called Emily or Hunter. It was a little unclear. I'd have to go back and watch it again. And the wording that they said, Emily was repeating the wording that Dylan said, was that something weird had happened last night, that she didn't know if she was dreaming or not. And can you come check out the house? Now, again, I don't want to super nitpick everything to death, but that's what's going to happen with this episode, and every piece of information that comes out for the next as the gag order gets lifted is exactly what was said, and especially attention is going to be paid to what Dylan said and what she did. What we do know, again, from being a little critical, is Dylan didn't call 911 first. Dylan didn't do anything other than call a friend and say something weird happened. That was the wording. Something weird happened last night. Not sure she dreamt it or not. And by the way, I have to say, as a personal note, it still itches in my craw, apparently. Somebody one time busted my ass because I pointed out that Dylan, on one of the mini police investigations of her story, said that she wasn't even sure that it happened, that she may have dreamt the entire thing. Somebody ripped me a new ass and said, "You're an asshole. Dylan never said that." Well, not only did she say that, but the friend repeats that that's exactly what Dylan said when she called. So F you for that person who said, "I'm an asshole," because Dylan never said she dreamt the whole thing. That is something she said to police. It is what Emily said that Dylan said when she called at 11:45. "I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure if I was dreaming or not." So again, definitive screw you to anybody who jumped my ass about how I'm an asshole for saying that Dylan dreamt the whole thing or ever said that, because she never said that. Yes, she did. It's verified multiple times, and here it is again. So there you go. I'm beating a dead horse because apparently it pissed me off when someone called me a liar for saying that, and I'm not lying. So again, in the show. It was clear from the call that, according to, as it was related by Emily, that Dylan stated that she was in the basement with Bethany. So again, there was some speculation to some versions of the story that Dylan went back into her bedroom and stayed there all night long. We know from the 911, not for the 911, we know from the text messaging between the girls that Bethany said, "Come down to my room, run," while they were talking about what just happened in the house. "Come down to my room, run." It was unclear to some people whether Dylan actually did go downstairs or not. Just because Bethany said, "Run, come down to my room," did she go down there? According to this documentary, we can clarify at the moment that Dylan was in the basement with Bethany. So she did at some point end up down there in the basement. So did it happen at the moment that Bethany said, "Come, Dylan, run down to the basement and join me down there"? That's where according to Emily, they were in the basement. Dylan had indicated apparently to Emily that she had called Xana a few times and hadn't responded, and "Can you just come over?" That was her attitude. Now, again, nitpicking things, which I said I didn't want to try to do too much, because I'm just going to give you first reactions. One has to always ask why Dylan didn't look through the house herself. Why is Dylan down in the basement, not going upstairs, not going right next door to her bedroom where Xana was, and instead ran downstairs and then said, "I don't know what happened. Can you come over and check things out?" That's weird and suspicious, and will remain to be weird and suspicious to me. And according to Emily, this was something that's not entirely unusual for Dylan. She said that Dylan before had become scared and called them up and said, "Hey, can you bring your boyfriends over to the house?" So Dylan had apparently a history, if you will, based on that one statement alone, of getting scared and asking people to come over to the house rather than calling 911 or police or anything like that. One has to ask why that's the case, if that's the case. Now, what we did find out some more when Emily and Hunter and another female friend came over, Xana and not Xana, Dylan and Bethany were outside of the house. They had exited the house, according to this documentary. So when the kids showed up, when the friends showed up, no 911 call at this point, when they showed up, Bethany and Dylan were outside of the house. They had exited the house, and their hands were on their face. She actually made that gesture. Their hands were on their face. They didn't seem terribly frightened. They seemed confused, like they didn't know what happened in the house. This was the attitude that was projected by the friends that showed up. Then at some point, it appears from the documentary that Hunter went into the house. The friend Hunter, the friend, not the brother, the friend Hunter went into the house shortly after Emily and her friend went into the house after Dylan, or after Hunter, to go up the stairs. So they're entering on the bottom floor where I'm getting the names all screwed up, where Dylan and Bethany were outside. So Hunter goes in on that ground floor. The girls follow shortly behind him. One of the girls indicated in the documentary, immediately when she entered the house, she knew something was wrong. Immediately. Police also, I want to point out from previous videos, they said when they showed up and they walked in on that bottom floor, they immediately knew something was wrong. Now, they don't put their words on why they immediately know something is wrong. Lots of things I want to point out, lots of things can contribute to the feeling, the sensation that something is wrong. For example, in a house full of people, a complete stillness and lack of any sound whatsoever could give you an eerie sensation that something's off. The complete lack, just 100% silence. If there's anybody moving in the house at all, there'd be noises, there'd be potential, some kind of signs of life, if you will. So one can argue that just stepping in and hearing dead silence could give you a creepy feeling that something's immediately off. Officers indicated that they immediately smelled the smell of death and blood, and they knew that something horrible had happened. This individual, the friend, says that when she steps in, again, behind Hunter, who had already entered ahead of them and had gone up the stairs, when she entered the house, immediately she knew something was wrong. So was that just a sensation of stillness in the house? Well, Hunter's moving around in the house, so I guess there is some movement. Is it the smell? Is it the stench? Whatever the case may be, police officers and kids immediately knew something was wrong, which begs the question, if you're nitpicking things a little bit, why it is that Dylan and Bethany don't realize something is seriously wrong. Now you can say, well, they did know something is wrong. That's why they called their friends and said, can you come over and check out the house? But what is it that everybody can tell immediately when they walk in the house? I would argue probably the smell of death and blood, but they didn't say that in the video. So she mentions how when she stepped into the house, she was immediately pushed away by Hunter, who said that somebody should call 911. So the girls were apparently far enough behind. I'm just trying to piece this together by the story, and I'm not trying to nitpick it to suggest anybody's lying. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to piece together in my mind what happened at that moment. Hunter must have been in long enough before the girls who followed him that he could go up, see, and do several things that he has to have done. Checked on Xana and Ethan, realized they had no pulse, and then turned around and came back and pushed the girls out. So they must have been some time behind him. Hunter couldn't have been immediately followed by the girls, because at the point that she says she stepped in, Hunter immediately pushes her back out of the house and says, call 911. At this point, it is alleged that Hunter had already found Xana. He had already found Ethan. The description in the documentary tells you that he noticed immediately that they had wounds on them, that there was blood everywhere, and at some point had checked their pulse and realized that they didn't have a pulse. So there's no question what Hunter saw, because he saw dead bodies, and he told the girls, and this is where the confusion gets answered a little bit about the unresponsive female. Somebody's unconscious. According to the video, it is clear when Hunter pushed the girls out and told them to call 911, he heroically, if you will, spared the girls from hearing what happened. He knew what happened. He knew that people were dead. He knew only that Xana and Ethan were dead. Again, afterthought. Nobody thought to check on Kaylee and Maddie at this point. He only knows that two of the people are gone. His best friend, Ethan, is dead. He says to spare the girls' trauma, he says, call 911. Tell them that there's an unconscious person in the room. That was her way of saying that Hunter knew that they were already dead, but he wanted to spare the girls the trauma of telling them exactly what happened. That, to be fair with you, makes 100% sense. So when we're getting to the question of why are they calling unresponsive female when they know that the person's dead, the question becomes, is the girl who's on the phone, the one who's telling them the address 1122 King Road residence, is not Dylan, from what I understand. It's a friend that took over the phone. It's a friend that came later. It's a friend that walked in behind Hunter and was pushed out by Hunter and told someone's unconscious. That is why that person says someone's unconscious in the house. Are you following my logic? So whether or not Dylan knows someone's dead or not, it's not Dylan who says someone's unconscious. From what I understand, it's the friend who was told by Hunter, who had went in and knew that there was death, that it was an unconscious person, because he was trying to spare the girls. So again, I think that might resolve some of your questions about the whole unresponsive female. It wasn't actually Dylan saying unconscious when she might have known that she was dead. All right, beating the dead horse to death on that one. So at one point on the phone, when the girl's giving the address, she says, while I'm giving the address 1122 King Road residence, Hunter apparently was, according to her, shaking his head and telling her they didn't have a pulse. Supposedly that's something that he said to her while she was on the phone with 911, saying they didn't have a pulse. So she's indicating that she was getting confirmation from Hunter while on the 911 call that they were deceased, that he couldn't get a pulse. What's interesting is when the police arrive, it doesn't look like the police separated into the people stepping outside. There was a comment that Dylan made, apparently within earshot of everyone, that she can't believe anybody would do this. Now that part becomes a little interesting. We don't, again, because at this point it was unconscious female. I don't know if maybe she heard Hunter say that there was no pulse. Dylan makes a comment, I can't believe anybody would do this. And then they have a scene, by the way, they cut away, and this is something I really want to address on my first thoughts. Ethan's brother is seen being interviewed about hearing about his brother having been killed. And he's laughing at points during that discussion about hearing about his brother being killed. And I want to make it 100% clear. No part of me personally believes that that him laughing about his brother's death is anything less, this is my opinion, is anything less than coping mechanism. When people are trying to relay a very, very tragic, emotional story, sometimes laughter or nervous laughter is what they call it. Nervous laughter is how we deal with it. So he's trying to give an interview. He doesn't want to break down on camera is the way I interpret it. And so he's got this kind of nervous laughter, like, I was just told, if Ethan's not responding or Ethan's not here or whatever. So he's giving his story and it's kind of got this smile / laughter to it. Not in my opinion at all uncharacteristic of somebody who is who's dealing with a very traumatic story and is trying not to break down. So I don't view that as anything. Now I know some people are probably going to jump all over it. Several family members during the telling of their story either have a smile on their face or seem to not be reacting the way that some people would respect or expect. I just want to state for the record, my personal feeling on the matter is that people respond to grieving and death very, very differently. And when they're on cameras, they don't want, some people don't want to show their emotions on camera. They don't want to break down on camera. A lot of people are very conscious of that and try to keep their grieving to private. So I personally will not make much out of the family's reactions. I did not see anything to me that set off any alarm bells that the family themselves had anything to do with these things or covering it up, and any kind of laughter / smiling on our part came across to me as a genuine nervous reaction to a very stressful interrogation and series of questions. None of the cops appear to be talking to any of the survivors and friends at the scene, which I find that very, very odd to me. The cops wouldn't even look at the kids, they said. Everyone was focused on Ethan and Xana. Like I said, it was an afterthought that Kaylee and Maddie were even asked about. But at some point, one of the girls said, when they finally said, hey, wait a minute, what happened to what's going on with Maddie and Kaylee? Were they there? She said their phones were pinging inside the house. I don't know exactly what that means by their phones were pinging inside the house. It was an odd statement. I'm not going to make a lot out of it at this point. It's just that one of the friends, afterthought, this is well after EMTs arrived, well after police arrived. If they've got things cordoned off, nobody's really talking about anything. And the kids are all trying to figure out what's going on. Then somebody finally decides, I guess, to check in on Maddie and Kaylee. And their phones apparently are pinging inside the house, but nobody's saying anything about it. The kids were very frustrated in this episode that police wouldn't talk to them, wouldn't even look at them. There was a moment, by the way, and this is a question, and I'm just kind of throwing this out as first reactions. It's a question I don't understand, and it's not, there's no conspiracy factor to this. Please understand, there's no conspiracy factor to my question. I want to know if people know the answer. It's a curiosity question, not a question about facts. I noticed, for example, that in one of the famous videos of Xana Kernodle, she's wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey. I think there's another place where Ethan Chapin is wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey. And then Xana's, it was Maddie's. I think Maddie's. And then that's the part that threw me off. I want to say it was Maddie Mogan's father that had a shirt on at one point. And this is why it brought my attention, and it's not a conspiracy. I'm just asking the question. I thought there was a scene of Maddie's father where he had a shirt and it said Pittsburgh on it. And then I thought to myself, that's weird. Like, we don't even hear about Xana and Maddie's relationship too much. What's with the Pittsburgh Steelers thing? I can understand if Xana if Xana's dad is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and then Xana herself is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and Ethan, who's dating Xana, is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I can understand all of that. But it seemed like it was Maddie's dad that had that Pittsburgh shirt on. Again, I'm not there's no speculation and no theory here. I just was trying to figure out, like, how do y'all become Pittsburgh Steelers fans in Idaho? Now, that's not to say that that's in itself, again, any conspiracy. I've got a friend where I grew up with in Washington State who is a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, but that's because they're a union worker, and a lot of union workers who are in unions and trade craft tend to like the Pittsburgh Steelers because it's like the epitome of the hardworking, steel worker type of thing. And so even if you aren't from Pittsburgh, sometimes people who are in that industry are big into it. I'm making way too much out of the Pittsburgh Steeler thing. It was a question, and I thought it was going to be short, and it's become a fucking huge monstrous thing. Didn't mean for that to happen. They talked about the 1 o'clock at 1:04 in the afternoon, and a vandal alert. That's the Idaho Vandals went out saying that there was homicides for people to stay inside. It was an hour or so later, I think, that it was updated to say 4 homicides. That's how the kids started to realize that Kaylee and Maddie must have also been in the house and were part of the homicides. And then they talked a little bit about the kids being put up and the families being put up in a hotel for the night, that the university had rented some hotel rooms and had asked the kids who lived nearby, even people who weren't at the 1122 King Road residence, but other people who were friends and lived at the houses nearby, that they wanted them off the street. They didn't want them anywhere near the house. For their own peace of mind or to stay out of the crime scene, whatever the case may be, the university rented rooms at a hotel. A lot of things have been made by people in the true crime community about whether or not the girls, Dylan and Bethany, were in the hotel before the murders and that they were already at the hotels and weren't even at the house. I don't think that this story and this documentary settles that issue about whether or not Bethany and Dylan could have been in a hotel room the night of the murders and weren't in the house. That doesn't settle that. But what they did answer is that the university did indeed rent hotel rooms for the family and the victims, or the victims' families and friends who were nearby, to have rooms and stay off of the King Road residence that evening. They talked about the families not getting sleep, everyone in there. They talked about being terrified. Every bump and noise that they heard in the hallway outside their rooms made them think that maybe they were getting attacked, because it was repeatedly stated over and over again that law enforcement believed this was a isolated but targeted attack. They kept repeating that word. This was a targeted attack. Now, the last thing I would say from a first reaction standpoint is, again, early indications were that it was a targeted attack. Now, what does that mean for you when you say targeted? For me, what targeted means is it wasn't a random act of violence. Whoever went there was targeting someone in the house or the house itself for a specific reason. That's what I mean. That's what I hear in my mind, and I think when I hear targeted attack, not a random act of violence. And again, the question becomes, were police using the word targeted simply because they didn't want the public being terrified that a killer was on the loose who might just randomly be attacking houses, and therefore they lied saying it was a targeted attack, therefore trying to make people realize that, hey, look, it's all over. Whoever wanted the people dead only wanted people dead in that house. Was it a flat out lie to make the population feel more secure? Or did police, as I believe is the indication, believe based on the wounds that one of the individuals or two of the individuals perhaps in the house were targeted, that they were the focus of the killings and other people may have been collateral damage? I think it's the latter. I think police realized based on the wounds that they saw early on that one person was probably the one that was targeted based on the difference of the wounds, and so they believed it was a targeted attack. That target was, I believe, in early police investigations, Kaylee Gonzalez. It later changed in the narrative that the target was Maddie and that everybody else was was just collateral damage. I feel like there's been a shift in the narrative for a reason. Early on, Kaylee was the obvious target. I think that's what police thought was the earliest target. I think that every indication was that Kaylee was the obvious target, that she was that night was picked because Kaylee wasn't staying there at the house, but she was back that night. She was kind of lured, some could argue, back to the house, and that's why that night in particular was picked. That house and that night was picked because Kaylee was back in town. That was the argument. But at some point, the narrative shift and everything has been about Bryan Kohberger must have maybe seen Maddie and became obsessed with Maddie and went there to kill Maddie, and everything else was collateral damage. There is no support for that kind of narrative that I can see at all, and it reeks to me of people trying to shift where the target was from. Then you have to ask yourself why. So if Bryan Kohberger did what he did, and again, he pled guilty on the stand. He pled guilty. His sentence is coming up. So you have to say, I can understand why you're going to say Bryan Kohberger did do it. Why are you asking the question, Mr. Devil's Advocates? Why are you asking the question if he did it? He said he did it. And by the way, I'm running a banner across the bottom of my screen that doesn't need to be there. I'm sorry about that. I should have hid that. There you go. That banner had nothing to do with this entire video, but I'm not going to recut the video, so it is what it is. The point being is that it feels like there was a shift in the narrative at some point, and I feel like that's an important thing to keep in mind. So this is my initial reactions to the video. Let me sum up one more time. No shockers in this episode. However, those who want to nitpick shit to death are going to now key in on what Bethany said, or not what Bethany, what Dylan said. How Dylan called friends, not 911. How she said something happened last night and I might have dreamt the whole thing. Those things are going to be under a fine-tooth comb and a microscope. All of the family's reactions, again, seem to me to be genuine or explainable by trauma. I see no reason to believe the families are anything other than victims in this scenario. So I want to be clear. Some of you accuse me of being victim shaming, of insulting the families. I'm sorry. If you believe that trying to understand exactly what happened to the residents of that home, if you think that's disrespectful to the family, because the only thing for you that's respectful for the family is to accept that one person did it and one person did it alone and nobody else was involved. I feel like if there were others involved, which I strongly believe that there are others involved at some point. Now, how much involved, I don't know, but I certainly believe that there was others involved, personally feeling. And to just let that go and hang it on one person because he admitted guilt and let everyone go who might have been involved is not justice, in my opinion, to the families. And I'm sorry that you feel that's disrespectful, because if the families just want a simple answer and be done with it, I get that, but that's not where I live. So that's my episode 1 take. We did it under a half hour. Sorry about the banner. That didn't make a whole lot of sense going through there. I'm going to go do a couple of errands. It's going to take me a couple hours. Then I will come back and I will spend probably another hour watching episode 2. And I'll give you my first thoughts on those. Thanks for watching Devil's Advocates. If you like this kind of style and content where I'm a little bit more neutral and I'm trying to be a little bit more calm, although I'm famous for my rants, I guess. The point being is that I try to be a little bit more neutral and I tell you how I see it. If you like this type of reporting, make sure you like, you follow, you subscribe. If you want to watch my lives, make sure you subscribe to all, not just notifications on videos, but all, so that you can know when I'm going live. And until next time, I'll see you in a little bit later today with my thoughts on episode 2.